sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Welcome back, everybody. Sometimes you just gotta dig in and go deep. And that's what we're doing today, taking a deep dive into the world of podcasts.
And not just any podcast, right? We're looking at the shows that managed to knock the Joe Rogan Experience out of the top spot.
Yeah, you would think that top spot with his huge following, that would be a lock.
You'd think so. But the podcasting world, well, it's a wild west out there. Always changing.
It really is. I mean, the Joe Rogan Experience, it's been around since, what, like 2009?
2009, yep. And he's had, everyone on the show. I mean, think about it. Donald Trump,
Bernie Sanders,
Amy Fox, Elon Musk, you name it.
It's pretty crazy, that range of guests. It must be a big part of his appeal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, he's pulling in listeners from everywhere, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of interests, but they're all tuning in to hear what Rogan has to say.
And let's not forget that whole Spotify exclusivity deal.
Oh, right. And then back to Apple in 2024.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts there that had to have shaken things up a bit, right?
For sure, for sure. But even with all that, he's usually right back at number one. It really makes you wonder, what does it actually take to, dethrone a podcasting giant?
That's the question, isn't it? And that is exactly what we are going to explore today.
I'm excited.
Me too. So first up, we got to talk about the MeidasTouch Podcast. They hit number one in February of 2025.
Really?
Yeah, according to Podscribe data.
Huh. See, now, the MeidasTouch, that one is interesting to me because, well, it's hosted by three brothers.
Oh, yeah. Ben, Brett, and Jordy Meiselas.
Yep. And their whole show, it's built around politics.
Which is always a hot topic, for better or worse.
Oh, absolutely. And they've managed to get some really big-name political guests on their show, too.
That must help with attracting listeners.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But I think their success, especially in actually surpassing Rogan for a while there, it goes beyond just having, famous names on the show.
What do you mean?
I think they really tapped into a specific kind of audience, an audience that's really hungry for in-depth political commentary, especially now, the way things are so divided.
Yeah, you got a point there. I've actually listened to a few episodes myself, and they describe the show as, I'm quoting here, a blend of brotherly love, comedy, news coverage, and deep discussions about supporting our democracy.
That sounds about right.
But what really stood out to me was their format. It's not just the news and interviews, They bring in personal stories, humor, all sorts of stuff to create this dynamic that pulls you in.
You're right. That's a great point. It's that mix, right? Smart commentary, but also really relatable, almost familial. And listeners pick up on that, that authenticity.
And that authenticity might be even more appealing when you compare it to Rogan, right? Some people find him to be kind of detached, maybe even confrontational.
I see what you're saying. That's in a media world that's so polished and produced, these guys, the Meiselas brothers, they're offering something different, something real.
So they found their lane, so to speak. They're being themselves, focusing on a specific audience.
And it's working. It really makes you think about what the model for success is in podcasting these days. It's a crowded field out there.
For sure. All right, well, speaking of finding your lane, let's move on to our next example. Not Gonna Lie with Kylie Kelp. Do you remember her?
Kylie Kelp. Oh, yeah. Jason Kelce's wife. Retired Eagles player.
That's right. And her podcast. It launched in December 2024, and bam, straight to number one.
Wow. That's quick. It's amazing how she used her platform to get that kind of instant success,
Yeah. Well, she had a built-in audience already. Her husband's career, her own personality, it all played a role.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's smart. Tapping into an existing fan base like that.
And the topics she covers, entertainment, pop culture, sports, family life, it's like a window into her world. I think people are just naturally curious.
Oh, yeah. Plus, she's a natural, she's a great storyteller. The energy, the humor, it all comes through on the podcast.
It really does. But here's where it gets interesting. In an interview, back in December 2024 with the New York Times, she said, and I quote, "I couldn't care less about the charts."
Really?
Yep. It's she's not even trying to be number one, which honestly makes her success even more fascinating,
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's almost like a paradox. Maybe that lack of ambition is what makes her so appealing. In a world where everyone's chasing fame, she's just being herself.
It really makes you think about what authenticity means in podcasting. Is it about trying to be relatable or just being who you are, regardless of the numbers?
That's the question, isn't it? I think it speaks to this bigger trend. Listeners are smart. They can spot a fake, a mile away.
Oh, absolutely.
What they want is something real, a connection, a sense that the person on the other side of the microphone is being genuine. And maybe that's Kylie Kelsey's secret weapon, that authenticity, that unguarded, realness.
It's a good point. It could be the key to her success. All right, well, let's switch gears one more time and talk about our final example for today. Archetypes, hosted by Meghan Markle.
Oh, yeah, the Duchess of Sussex. That one, it definitely made a splash back in 2022 when it premiered. Spotify exclusive, right?
Yep, Spotify exclusive. And you know what? It debuted at #1 right out of the gate, knocked Rogan right off his throne.
Wow.
And the focus of the show, they were, quote, investigating, dissecting, and subverting the labels that try to hold women back.
That's how Spotify described it, right?
Exactly. It was a topic that felt very timely, very relevant. It tapped into a lot of conversations about gender roles, expectations, the challenges that women face.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. Despite the success, all the buzz that it generated, they only ever released 12 episodes. Wait, really?
Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, it definitely left people wanting more. Why only 12? What happened?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was it Meghan Markle's choice? Were there production issues? Did her, royal status play a role?
Those are all really good questions. And unfortunately, we don't have the answers. But, I think that actually adds to the intrigue, the mystery.
It definitely does. So there you have it. 3 very different podcasts, 3 different approaches. But they all managed to outperform the Joe Rogan experience at the top of the charts. It's amazing to see such a diverse range of topics and personalities resonating with listeners.
It really is. I mean, it really shows you that the podcasting landscape is changing, evolving, and it highlights the power of those authentic voices that we were talking about. They're connecting with listeners on all sorts of levels.
It's not just about one voice anymore, right? There's room for all kinds of perspectives, all kinds of stories.
And that's what makes it so exciting. We're seeing more innovation, more creativity.
Yeah.
It's no longer a one-size-fits-all situation. There's a space for everyone. The success of these podcasts, it proves that. And I think that's pretty awesome.
It really is. It feels like we're on the cusp of something big. Like, who knows what the podcasting world will look like in a few years?
I know, right? What new voices will emerge? What new formats will we see? It's so exciting to think about.
It is. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and really think about what we've learned from these 3 examples. The MeidasTouch, Not Gonna Lie with Kylie Kelsey, and Archetypes. What do they tell us about the changing nature of how we listen to and consume audio content?
That's a really good question. What do they tell us? What do you think?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the importance of that authentic connection. Listeners want something real, something they can relate to, something that feels genuine.
Absolutely. And it's not just about being yourself. It's about tapping into that shared experience, understanding your audience, and speaking to their lives.
It's about building a community, right? A sense of belonging, of understanding, of that shared purpose.
Exactly. And all 3 of those podcasts, they did that. In their own way, they tapped into a niche, resonated with an audience that was hungry for their perspective, their voice. And that's a powerful lesson for anyone who's thinking about starting a podcast. Find your people, be yourself, and connect with them on a real level.
Because in the end, that's what matters, right? The downloads, the chart rankings, that's all secondary. What truly makes a podcast successful is the impact it has on the listeners.
And as technology keeps advancing, as listener preferences evolve, that connection, that bond between the host and the audience, it's only going to become more important. So, yeah, it's a really exciting time to be part of this world. So much potential, so many possibilities.
Absolutely. I'm already thinking about what the future holds. Who will be the next unexpected hit? What new formats or voices will captivate us?
Who knows? But I'm sure it's going to be amazing. The podcasting world is full of surprises.
You know what? You're right. And that's why we love it.
Exactly. All right, well, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked a lot about these individual podcasts, but let's zoom out for a second. What do these trends tell us about the bigger picture of audio content? How are things changing?
Okay, I like that. Let's unpack that. What does the success of these podcasts tell us about the changing nature of how we consume audio content?
Well, for one thing, it feels like we're moving away from this idea that a single podcast, like the Joe Rogan Experience, can dominate the entire landscape.
It's true. The podcasting world is becoming more fragmented, with listeners gravitating towards niche content that caters to their specific interests.
It's almost like the evolution of cable TV. We went from a handful of major networks to hundreds of specialized channels, each catering to a specific audience. Now, it seems like podcasting is going through a similar transformation.
And that's a good thing. It means more diversity, more voices, more perspectives. It means listeners have more choices and creators have more opportunities to connect with their ideal audience.
I completely agree. But it also makes me wonder about the challenges of navigating such a crowded landscape. How does a new podcast break through the noise and find its listeners?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But I think one key takeaway from the examples we've discussed today is the importance of authenticity.
Right. It's not enough to simply have a great concept or a well-produced show. Listeners crave genuine connection. They want to feel like they're listening to real people with real stories and real perspectives.
And that's something that can't be faked. It has to come from a place of genuine passion and a willingness to be vulnerable, to share your experiences, even the messy ones.
That's so true. And it makes me think about the role of social media in all of this. It's become an essential tool for podcasters to connect with their audience, build community, and promote their shows.
Absolutely. Social media allows podcasters to bypass traditional gatekeepers and reach listeners directly. It's a powerful tool for building a loyal following and creating buzz around your show.
But it's also a double-edged sword. With so much content vying for attention, it can be difficult to stand out from the crowd. And there's a constant pressure to engage, to be present, to maintain that connection with your audience.
It's a delicate balance for sure, but I think the podcasters who are succeeding in this new landscape are the ones who are using social media authentically to build relationships rather than just promote their shows.
They're sharing their stories, engaging in conversations, and creating a sense of community around their podcasts.
Exactly. They're treating their listeners like friends, not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
You know, it's really inspiring to see how podcasting is evolving. It's a medium that's constantly pushing boundaries, experimenting with new formats, and finding new ways to connect with listeners.
And that's what makes it so exciting. The possibilities are endless. We're only just scratching the surface of what podcasting can be.
I can't wait to see what the future holds. But for now, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Agreed. It's been a fascinating exploration of the evolving podcasting landscape.
And I hope our listeners have gained some valuable insights into what it takes to create a successful podcast in today's crowded market.
Remember, authenticity is key. Find your niche, connect with your audience, and don't be afraid to be yourself.
And most importantly, keep exploring. There are so many amazing podcasts out there waiting to be discovered. Who knows? Maybe the next podcast to dethrone a giant is just around the corner. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.